All right, everyone, welcome back. Ready for another deep dive. Today, we're heading up north, way up north, to Finland.
Ooh, Finland. Always wanted to go. Lots of lakes.
You know it. And speaking of lakes, we're diving into a case that's been chilling, literally and figuratively, for over 6 decades. The Lake Bodom murders from 1960.
1960. Wow, that's a cold case.
Yeah, a real mystery that's gripped Finland for generations. 3 teenagers brutally murdered while camping, one sole survivor, and to this day, no one definitively knows who did it.
So what are we looking at today? Police reports, witness statements.
We're going deep with the Case File podcast episode on this one. They really break down the whole thing, the scene, the suspects, the investigation, all of it.
Sounds like a puzzle with a lot of pieces.
You got it. And some of those pieces might be missing, others might not fit quite right, but that's what makes this so fascinating. We're going to try to put it all together and see what picture emerges.
I'm all in. Take me to Lake Bodom.
All right, so picture this. It's Pentecost weekend, 1960. It's a festive time in Finland, a time for young love, new beginnings, all that good stuff. And on the shores of this beautiful lake, Lake Bodom, just outside Helsinki, you have 2 young couples all set up for a weekend of camping fun.
Young love, camping under the midnight sun. Sounds idyllic.
Right. We've got Seppo Boisman and his girlfriend Tuulikki Mäki, and then Nils Gustafsson with his girlfriend Ermeli Björklund. They rode up on their motorcycles, all excited for a carefree getaway. They had their tent, their food, even a little something to drink, enjoyed those long summer nights.
Typical teenagers just enjoying their holiday.
Exactly, which makes what happened next all the more shocking, because sometime in those early morning hours, the peace of that campsite was shattered, brutally.
Oh no, what happened?
When the sun rose, a horrifying discovery was made. 3 of the teenagers, Seppo, Tuulikki, and Ermeli, were found dead inside their tent.
Murdered.
Brutally murdered.
I got chills just thinking about it.
It's a grim scene, even just reading about it. The tent itself was slashed open from the outside, almost ripped apart. The canvas collapsed down on the bodies inside.
It sounds like something out of a horror movie.
It really does. And then when you get to the descriptions of the injuries, it gets even worse. We're talking blunt force trauma to the head and face, multiple stab wounds, just a savage, frenzied attack.
Awful. Which one of them was attacked the worst?
Seppo. He was found face down, and his head and back were just covered in wounds. Really horrific.
So much rage.
And to make things even more puzzling, some things were missing from the scene. Wallets, IDs, even a knife was gone, Seppo's jacket, and their watches too.
So the killer might have taken them. To throw off the investigation, maybe?
Yeah, potentially. It's like they wanted to erase any connection to the victims or to themselves.
It's chilling. But what about the 4th teenager? Nils, what happened to him?
Nils. He was found outside the tent, severely injured, but alive. Rushed to the hospital, clinging to life, but he had absolutely no memory of the attack.
Amnesia. So he couldn't tell the police anything about what happened.
Not at first, no. And that's where things get really interesting, because Nils' survival becomes a double-edged sword for the investigation.
How so?
Well, on one hand, he's the only witness to this horrific crime, but on the other hand, his amnesia creates this huge obstacle. It's like having a key witness who can't remember a single detail.
So it's both a potential source of information and a huge frustration for the police. A real conundrum. So where did the investigation go from there? I can only imagine the pressure on the Finnish police. You have this gruesome scene, a sole survivor with amnesia, a community on edge. Where do you even start?
Exactly. It's a high-stakes investigation from the get-go. The Case File episode really emphasizes how quickly everything unfolded. They were diving into the lake, searching the woods, interviewing anyone and everyone.
I bet there were a ton of false leads too, right? People pointing fingers, rumors flying around.
Oh, yeah, totally. There's this one part where they talk about a tip they got from a local bishop. Can you believe that? And then there was a soldier acting suspiciously, and even a guy who was caught with a bloody knife.
A bloody knife. That sounds pretty incriminating.
It does, right. But as it turns out, it was just a coincidence. The guy had been out hunting, totally unrelated. But you can see how every little thing would become a potential clue in those early days.
Makes sense. Everyone's a suspect when you're desperate for answers. Was there anyone who stood out, though? Anyone they really focused on?
There was this one guy, Carl Veldemar Gilstrom. They called him the Kiosk Man because he ran a kiosk near the lake.
Kiosk man, huh? What made him a suspect?
Well, he had a reputation. Known for his bad temper, hated campers, and there were even stories about him slashing tents.
Slashing tents. Oh, that's creepy, especially considering how the victim's tent was found.
Right. And it gets even weirder. Later on, they found Nils's and Seppo's shoes near Gilstrom's property.
Wow, okay, that sounds pretty damning. Case closed, right?
Not so fast. There were some problems with pinning it on Gilstrom. His wife gave him an alibi, said he was home all night. And they searched his property really thoroughly, but never found any hard evidence connecting him to the murders.
Huh. Another dead end. But with all those red flags, it's no wonder he remained a person of interest.
Absolutely. But while all this is going on, the police are still trying to figure out what happened to Nils. Remember, he's the sole survivor, but he can't remember anything.
Right, the amnesia. Did they ever try to, jog his memory or something?
They did. They brought in this psychiatrist, Dr. Jorma Reho Stenbeck, who specialized in hypnosis.
Hypnosis. Wow, taking it back to the old school.
It was controversial even back then. A lot of debate about how reliable it is. But the police were desperate for a break in the case, so they decided to give it a shot.
So what happened? Did Nils remember anything under hypnosis?
He did. And it's pretty disturbing what he described. He talked about hearing screams, seeing a dark figure attacking him. He even gave a description of the assailant, said it was a tall man with blonde hair wearing dark clothes.
Spooky. So they had a description, a possible lead. Did it pan out?
Well, it added another layer of complexity to the case. Because now the question was, are these genuine memories from that night, or are they false memories implanted under hypnosis?
Ooh, good point. The whole repressed memory thing, it can be a bit murky. I guess that makes it hard to know what to do with that information. So did this hypnotic description lead them to anyone?
It did, but it's a pretty strange twist. There was this patient at the same hospital where Nils was recovering, a guy named Hans Assmann.
Okay, Hans Assmann.
Yeah.
And what's the connection to Nils?
Well, several people who worked at the hospital claimed that Assmann matched the description Nils gave under hypnosis, eerily similar.
What? That's a wild coincidence. Or maybe not a coincidence at all.
Exactly. And it gets even stranger. There were reports of Assmann behaving really oddly, talking about knives and blood, even being seen with red stains on his clothes.
Okay, hold on. This Hans Assmann guy, he sounds like a character straight out of a spy novel or something. Did they look into his background?
They did. Turns out there were rumors about him having a shady past, maybe even some ties to the Nazis or the KGB.
No way. So they had this potentially dangerous guy who looks like the assailant Nils described under hypnosis. And he's making creepy comments about blood and knives. Seems like they had their man right.
It does, doesn't it? But again, it's not that simple. Assmann had an alibi for the night of the murders, and just like with Gilstrom, they couldn't find any hard evidence to link him to the crime scene.
So another dead end. It feels like we keep taking one step forward, two steps back with this case.
I know, right? It's like we're getting closer to the truth, but it keeps slipping away.
But then, decades later, something amazing happens. DNA testing enters the picture.
Fast forward to 2004. DNA technology has come a long way, and the Finnish authorities decide to take another look at the Lake Bodom evidence. Maybe, just maybe, some new tech can crack this case wide open.
And what do you know? They actually find some usable DNA.
On a few different items from the crime scene, too. And get this, it matches. Nils Gustafsson.
No way. The sole survivor. The victim. Now he's the main suspect.
Talk about a plot twist. I bet that news turned Finland upside down.
I can't even imagine. Everyone probably thought he held the key to solving this, and boom, he's the one they arrest.
So after 44 years of mystery, what's the new theory? What do they think happened?
Well, the prosecution came up with this whole story about a jealous rage.
Jealous rage.
Yeah, they said Nils had been rejected by Irma Lee earlier that night. You know, maybe some teenage drama, hurt feelings.
Okay, I can see that. Teenagers, alcohol, things can escalate quickly.
And they claimed that Nils, in a drunken fury, just snapped, lashed out at his friends, killed them one by one.
Wow, that's intense.
And they used the hypnotic regression, too. Said he was repressing the memory of what he did, that all those inconsistencies pointed to guilt.
Right, the missing stuff, too. The wallets, the watches. They said he took them as trophies.
Chilling, right. They even brought in some witnesses who claimed they'd seen Nils acting strangely that night, all aggressive and jealous.
Sounds like a pretty strong case. So what did Nils' defense team have to say about all this?
Well, they fought back hard. First, they went after the DNA evidence.
How do you even argue against DNA evidence?
They argued it was contaminated, pointed out that those samples had been sitting around for decades, not stored properly. Who knows what could have happened to them?
That makes sense. After all that time, it's got to be tough to guarantee pristine evidence.
And they also poked holes in the prosecution's timeline. Said the blood spatter patterns didn't match their version of events.
Interesting. So They basically argued the physical evidence didn't back up the prosecution's claims.
Exactly. And then there's the motive, or lack thereof. Sure, there were some claims of jealousy, but nothing concrete.
But we talked about Taliki's diary. She never mentioned any problems between Nils and Ermeli. Actually, she described them all as a happy group of friends.
So the defense argued there was no real reason for Nils to snap, no matter how much alcohol was involved.
It's a classic he said, she said situation, but with DNA and forensic evidence thrown into the mix. So what happened? What was the verdict?
Well, after a long trial, tons of testimony, and a whole lot of media attention, the judges said, not guilty.
Not guilty. So Nils was acquitted.
Yep, they just weren't convinced by the prosecution's case. There were too many holes, too much doubt.
So Nils walks free. But the question remains, if he didn't do it, who did?
Back to square one. And even with the acquittal, the suspicion never really went away. Some folks still believe Mills was the killer. Others thought it was Gilstrom or that mysterious Assman, or maybe someone we haven't even talked about.
I guess some mysteries just stay mysteries.
It's true. We can look at the evidence, analyze the theories, but sometimes those definitive answers just elude us.
Still, what a case, right? It's a roller coaster of twists and turns, and it really makes you think.
Definitely. It shows how complicated these investigations can be. Memories fade, evidence gets lost or contaminated, and sometimes we're just left with more questions than answers.
It reminds us that truth can be elusive, especially after so much time has passed.
And that even with all the advancements in forensics and technology, sometimes we just can't definitively solve every case.
But that doesn't mean we stop searching, right?
Absolutely not. We keep digging, keep asking questions, and maybe, just maybe, one day we'll finally uncover the truth behind the Lake Bodom murders.
Well, folks, there you have it. Our deep dive into the Lake Bodom murders, a mystery that continues to fascinate and baffle even after all these years.
Thanks for joining us on this journey, and remember, keep that curiosity alive. You never know what mysteries you might uncover.
Until next time, keep exploring, and we'll see you on our next deep dive.